Hey traders, this is Christian from Tribeca Trade Group, and today is Thursday, March 28th. This is your end of day recap. And well, a couple of things hit after hours. A little bit late on the video today because we were watching or waiting for Restoration Hardware earnings in the trading room, and they came out. I'll go over them in just a second, but yeah, it's the other announcements were a bunch of CEOs leaving. Wells Fargo, which is definitely I would think a positive, considering how much stuff has gone over there. How many negatives have gone on with that CEO. So he's out. You could see that name's popping after the close. Also, Morgan Stanley and Campbell's, which is unrelated, but seems like a bunch of CEOs are leaving today. Restoration Hardware, their guidance was really low. Take a look at this down here. I did play this name for earnings. I will always tell you, what we trade in, and I'm completely transparent. But yeah, I put on a long play for earnings for Restoration Hardware. Why did I do that? Because the short interest is huge on Restoration Hardware. So I would do it again. Just because it's worth, if it happens to beat on earnings, the thing will fly. I think it was a worthwhile play. I actually did just purchase some in the aftermarkets because you can see this virgin point of control was taken out here, and I'll talk a little bit about that. I've been putting those on Twitter a lot, and people have been asking me questions. Hey, can you do a video on them? What are they? And I do go over them just almost every night because they're significant all over the place. So what are they, right? So we're actually putting together more of a formal video and kind of a pamphlet on this, not a book. I don't want to make anybody read a book, but it's pretty simple stuff once you kind of get the hang of it. But it's basically what these purple lines are on my charts, and what these squares are value areas, right? So the one that came into play that we've been talking about for the last week or so is what's been going on with TLT. So if you go to the chart, the daily chart of TLT, I'll wait for this to come up. So you can see, and I've been talking about how this level needed to be taken out. So what is this? What are these virgin point of controls? What the value areas are is the market profile, and what we do with our own proprietary indicator. And I've licensed this from Mr. Webbegol, who is the creator of this. But it will basically draw a value area around a volume profile. So the last period, right? So if we look at, right, this period is based on the value area of the previous period, right? So the March value area is basically from the February price action. Now, where this becomes interesting is notice that the price action usually kind of crosses the yellow line and it becomes filled, right? The price action here filled it. And then moved away from it. But most of the time, the inside the value area, the point of control, which is where the most volume has occurred in a period, usually price passes through it. If price doesn't pass through it, what happens is it becomes almost like a gap, right? And you could see the one here. Notice how price never got into this at all. It was moving very fast and fell apart. But price, for whatever reason, and I have some theories based on this, which is larger than this video, but price will remember that this was at one point a high volume area right back here. So at some point it will come back and it will tag that area, and sometimes it will get above it, but a lot of times it will seek it out, especially once you're outside of a range, outside of value. So here was one that got taken out, and you could see what happened. The thing just completely searched this price out and took it out. Right, and this is what we were talking about for over the last week, was that there's another one ahead here. And the closer you get to these, it's like they have magnetic force. They're more and more likely to get taken out. So again, price can get above them, but there's a significant portion of the time that price just stops, especially when there's one not behind. The only one that I see behind this one is if you go to the weekly chart in TLT. But notice how far away it is. Could it get up to 130 or 130 and a half? It certainly could, but it may not do it in a straight line. And really it depends if it's outside of value, right? So it is now triggered because we're outside of value. But the magnetic force, I think, is probably not that strong. So if there continue to be buyers that come in, that's probably where it will shoot for. But so how I would kind of wrap this up here is, if price cannot maintain above this value area, then I would not worry about that one above there. If it backs off, then this VPOC this version point of control will act as really a really good barrier, and a really good place to kind of take a target, or to possibly even put a short on, if you so want to do that. A couple examples I could show you just recently. This has been all over the place, but we saw one for DR Horton yesterday. I was saying for a long time, for months, and you could go back and you could check my Twitter feed, but I was saying that the target would be for DHI would be to get back to this virgin point of control. So again, keep an eye on this. I would not initiate a new long until it gets above 43. A couple other ones that we've been talking about on Twitter. SMH, right? I even said on Twitter, if you put my name, my Twitter handle at @CFromhertz, and you put $SMH, I said that 110 is the level to watch, and certainly that's exactly. Again, I'm not making this up. You look at my Twitter feed for proof. And then the other level that I thought why this was so significant at 110 was because not only was there a verging point of control in the daily chart, but there was also one on that's not a verging point of control, that's the top of value. So when SMH, the semiconductor ETF, went all the way through value, that's your place to take the trade-off. Similarly, another semiconductor name, AMD, notice where this went, right to the top of value and stopped on the weekly chart. Very significant, the weekly chart, because it's the value area for the whole year. Go to the daily chart. Where did this take out a verging point of control? Again, and notice this is so much more clear for my explanation purposes, is that price didn't get anywhere near. Notice where the volume profile was, right? You could see shaded in here. And so again, that's the highest point that's the highest area of volume. And notice it had earnings and it gapped below. It didn't even get close. It didn't even get inside the value area for this period, which is highly unusual. But it left this big volume node. And once you get up here, price remembers. It just absolutely does. So, that's a little bit, and you can email me if you have any questions about that. Listen, we right now we are selling the indicator. I sell it in my room. I give members, if they stay long enough, as long as they stay 3 months, I give them $100 off. And you can ask any member. We use this religiously in the trading room because they're really great. I mean, you're not going to see these levels anywhere else on the charts. You're just not. So it works exceptionally well, and I stand behind it. I only sell anything that I use every single day. And if I wouldn't use something, and didn't stand behind it, then there's no way I would sell it. I'm not one of these people. I know certain trading rooms, what they'll do is they'll have like an indicator of the month where they'll just keep. And I won't say any names, but I know who the parties are. They're like constantly trying to make money off of coming out with an indicator of the month, and that's what they try to do. They try to come out with one of these things and sell the shit out of them. I'm sorry for my language, but I don't do any of that. I mean, what I really like is when something works, you stick with it. You don't create something new. Unless you're trying to improve it. And we've had a few different versions of this indicator, but we don't do any of that type of, I'm here to help people. I'm not here to, to make a quick buck, and I'm in this for the long haul. So anyway, that's a little bit about and of course I say this almost at the end of every video. You can contact me. I'm happy to kind of go through not only this is the value area indicator, but what we do on a day-to-day basis. This was I try as much as possible, especially in a confusing tape, to add some value, and I'll go through what we saw in the tape today. But there was some really interesting things that had some strength. I thought the rails. I added a CSX trade today. Notice what, this is a name that's been on my radar for a little while, but I mentioned that interesting that all the rails are showing some strength. So I traded UNP about 2 weeks ago, and I was able to hit one really nice target. But so this is what I think UNP still looks pretty good. It just could not get going. I think I added it here, took a target here, and then just finally got out. I think for a little bit less than my average cost basis. But look at it; it looks good again, and you could basically use the 50-day moving average in that bottom of value. Also, NSC had a wonderful day, up 2%, back to 52-week highs. The only one I did today was CSX. I think CSX also looks good. Notice you're going to have a MACD crossover that may be coming up in a day or two. What else did I trade today? McDonald's. This is a name I've been watching for a while. Almost looks like some of the rail names. A very similar looking chart. I have no idea why, but I like the McDonald's chart here. It's getting above this resistance. Finally, you had a full bar close. So this was a little bit risky. I'm going to talk about some of the strategy. You can see it looks fine on the weekly bar as well. So far, so good. But I think, just to kind of go over a little bit of strategy, these days are really, really interesting in terms of the price action at the beginning of the day versus the afternoon versus the afternoon. It's almost 3 different days in one. What we've been noticing, and this is what I sent out on the private Twitter feed. I'll get out of this tweet. But I'm really actually enjoying what we're doing. I got out of my SVMK today. Nice profitable trade. So we're talking about how volatility's been showing up at similar times of the day. So right around 10:15, this was yesterday, and we saw the VIX skyrocket higher. And then, so that was at 10:15, same exact time today where the VIX got really well bid, to a lesser extent today. And then at the same time, the VIX sells off, really at lunchtime, which is really, the low volume portion of the day. And sometimes you see a fake move around lunchtime, and then volatility starts to pick up once volume starts to increase around 2 o'clock. But we've just been seeing these completely trail off. So we'll see if we get that again tomorrow. What's doing that? Could be a sell program that somebody is just reducing exposure for over an hour, over 2 hours. Sometimes traders do that. They stick it. What's called in the machines is what we used to say. You basically can use a program like a VWAP algorithm or a TWAP algorithm, which I used to trade all the time. You basically in a trading system you can put either one name in or a basket of names in and say, okay, I want to trade this over 2 hours, and it will evenly slice the order over 2 hours. And again, you could either do it via TWAP, meaning slice it evenly, or you could do it VWAP, and it will use the volume curve of the day. That's one of the most highly used algorithms that that traders use to execute trades. Again, not a proprietary, or sorry, not a predatory algorithm. That is just an algorithm to help execute an order. I know when people say algos that they think like, oh my God, they're manipulating the system. But algos actually, for the most part, really help traders execute. Again, I'm speaking from personal experience because I used to do this trading. Just looking at the VIX on the daily chart, yeah, I mean, it looks like we talked about possibly making a lower high here, and it looks like it's starting to dissipate. Now, keep in mind, tomorrow's quarter end, so anything goes on days when you have quarter end, but we've been talking about that in this week's videos, that maybe there's a little bit of front running. By the way, the VIX closed on the absolute lows of the day. And again, around 10 o'clock, and then I think 12 o'clock was the last hurrah for the VIX today, and then just straight down. So pretty unusual stuff, I would say. I also like to look at the VVIX. That was down 3.7%. I was looking at this around 12 o'clock today too. Sometimes that will give you a little bit of a heads up if volatility is returning. But this, it still has to break through these moving averages. But I would say this is pretty good looking so far. IWM, if you're a day trader and you're not, out of the major indices, right? S&P, Qs. Diamonds you could trade as well, day trade. But I think IWM right now is really moving for day trading purposes. We were kind of commenting that in the trading room. I mean, this was up 1.1% to actually down on the day, then to back to the highs. So really, I would say unusual to see something like that. And again, if you're really good at scalping, I would look at IWM right now because it is all over the place. All right, might as well look at the chart of IWM very quietly, and it's funny because I feel like I'm jinxing it, but I put out a couple tweets on my regular Twitter feed about how IWM was leading, and then all of a sudden the market fell apart. But up 89 basis points, SPY was only up about 40 basis points, and the Qs again underperformed up 20 basis points. Also could be because of that big lift IPO that's coming out tomorrow, where maybe some investors are making some room for their allocation that they'll get tonight on Lyft, again, which goes public tomorrow. Sent out a whole big article on that to members earlier today. So yeah, IWM is recovering from last week's swoon and underperformance. The other area I talked about, the rails, having some really nice outperformance, and the charts I think look wonderful on the rails. But IYT also up 1.2% in outperforming, right? So these were the problem areas that everybody's been moaning about, and it's nice to see even the regional bank up 1.3%, right? These things get so many more headlines when they're going down versus when they're going up, right? They're like all quietly kind of going up here. HYG, by the way, the high yield bond ETF, up 20 basis points today too. So the credit market has not really, other than the TLT, which has been going up like crazy, and talked about the level taken out today, but there really hasn't been any stress. And as well, I analyzed the fund flows daily and ETF. The only one that's really been seeing outflows is BKLN, which is bank loans. The other fixed income ETFs, even on the Treasury side, there hasn't been a lot of volatility in the flows at all. And there was actually a little bit more of high yield bond inflows this week. So it just seems like it's a little bit of a rough patch that we're getting through in the market. Trust me, if I saw more warning signals, because I am a macro investor and I will look at things like credit spreads and what's going on internationally, which Brexit is another thing that could be just having its way with the markets a little bit, because it does seem like the market is responding when there's a negative Brexit headline out there. Volatility tends to pick up around that. So that's it. We'll see what we get for tomorrow. All in all, the one thing that I wanted to say just before the video end is you just have to be really careful about where you're entering trades. It could really mess up your day. Just like if you go back to IWM, if you pick the high point today, you're going through some pain. If you're adding trades in the first half hour, it is very difficult to manage to get through that. You have to be adding on the dips too. But a lot of that has to do with, and these are things that you can change your behavior around, right? We can't control what the market does, but if the market's going to do this and have this pattern of ramping the first half hour and then completely falling apart, you have to be very, very disciplined and tell yourself, really, if you're going to start a position, that's fine. But right now for me, I'm really trying not to add any major risk in that first half hour of the day. It's just not worth it. And again, some of which, I think one or two trades I put on in the first couple bars, but I'm always leaving myself room, putting on maybe a quarter position size or a third position size, and then I can come in. I did that with CSX today. I started a very small position, and then I added into the weakness. Once I saw that volatility was coming out, I think I added right on this bar. So I think I probably added here, which was wrong in the beginning of the day, and then I went ahead and added back here. So that's it for today's video. Again, my email is cfromhertz. So first initial, last name at tribecatradegroup.com if you have any questions. Thank you very much for watching and have a great night.